Hey everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, like usual, by Scott Nelson. Hello, sir.
What's up, man? It's like a real emergency pod because it's an emergency pod, and there's like the storm of storms apparently is bearing down on us right now.
It is, and Scott and I are not in the same location this time. We're actually trying out a new system where I can record at home, and he can record at home. So we're both, I think, in our respective upper room studios. So we'll see how it works out. So the reason that we're doing this emergency pod is that today we got the verdict in the trial against Johnson & Johnson for the opioid. I guess the opioid trial is the correct name, right?
That's it. Yeah. So this was the lawsuit that Attorney General Hunter had filed on behalf of the citizens of the state of Oklahoma to try and hold manufacturers of opiates accountable for the opioid epidemic or crisis or whatever word you'd like to use about what's facing not just Oklahoma, but states around the country.
Right. And I think what we found out today. This is the third trial we've had, and so far Oklahoma is 3-0. Arguably, we've the first two settled, right, with Purdue Pharma and Teva Pharmaceuticals, and this one went to trial. Was a long trial, and today the verdict from the judge is ruled in Oklahoma's favor. Ruled in Oklahoma's favor. However, I think the reason that we're having this podcast is not just for the ruling, but for the size of the award that was made by the judge.
Yeah, so I think kind of just a recap for everybody. So, Attorney General Hunter and the attorneys that he retained to try the case had asked for $17 billion, and this I think it's I say it gets a little bit technical because that's the excuse I want to use in case what I'm about to explain is wrong, but. They asked for the $17 billion, and the reason that's the number that the state was seeking was because they filed this case under a public nuisance law, and a public nuisance law filing the case that way allows them to ask for an abatement, so a judgment that of money that the state can use to abate this public nuisance, and then they can calculate how much that should be. So it's rather than just saying we think you should give us $17 billion just because, it's we think you should give us $17 billion because over time that is what it's going to take for us to kind of fix this problem. So that's what the state had asked for. The verdict today, Judge Thad Bachman, who's the judge in the case, found for the state of Oklahoma, essentially saying that, yes, he agreed that Johnson & Johnson was responsible to some degree through a variety of practices for the opioid epidemic, but the judgment was for $572 million, which is substantially less than $17 billion.
Right. So it's slightly less than 3% of what we ask for. And now, sometimes I feel like you just never know, right? Like judges might rule in favor, and when it comes to another individual, the size of the award can vary. Could be the huge amount. What was most notable to me, I think, about this is, well, first of all, $500 million ain't no slouch, right? Like, that's significant.
Yeah, 572. That's a lot. Closer to 6. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, if it was in my account, would be on a tropical island right now. But in the grand scheme of like the state budget, it's not going to last that long. So the other thing is that as soon as the ruling came out, Johnson & Johnson and two other opioid manufacturers' stock prices spiked, went up like 2%, which is a pretty hefty jump.
Yeah, Johnson & Johnson, they went up 4%, right? And after hours trading, they went up 4%.
And so, even like CNBC had tweeted this out that like, hey, it seems like shareholders were perhaps relieved that that it wasn't more money in the settlement.
Well, to put that in context, you know what Johnson Johnson's gross revenue was last year?
Ooh, I saw this. It was like 82 billion.
$81 billion.
All right, I was only $1 billion off.
Yeah, so this is for Johnson and Johnson. I mean, this is literally a drop in the bucket, right? Like, 572 million out of 81 billion. Let me. I'm not great, at the
Well,
new
but
math,
to be fair, that was revenue, not profits. I'm sure their profit was also in the billions.
but still, that's 0.7% of their total revenue.
So
So,
they'll be okay, is what you're saying.
fine.
I don't know if our listeners can hear that, but the wind has just arrived at my house. It'll be at your house in about 2 minutes, I think.
Yeah, the thunders at mine. So that's interesting. I think there's a couple of questions, and we don't know what's going to happen next with this. So Johnson and Johnson has said that they're going to appeal. So we can certainly expect that there's not going to be a $572 million. At least what they're saying, there's not going to be a $572 million check written to the state of Oklahoma quite yet, because Johnson and Johnson expects to appeal this. In which case, it's going to go to the Oklahoma State Court of Appeals. So that's the one step below the Supreme Court. In the state court of appeals, they can do a couple of things. They can just say, nope, we agree. They can overturn everything, or they can say, yeah, we agree that Johnson and Johnson is responsible, but what we don't agree about is the judgment that Judge Bachman, the trial judge, handed down. So they can say, hey, we think that maybe you didn't come to the right figure. That's going to be really.
Could they bump it up or just decrease it?
So my understanding, actually, and this is a little bit technical, and this is not my own knowledge. This is me talking to a lawyer friend who was talking after she hadn't read through the decision in its entirely yet. So this is a little bit spitballing. But what we think is that it depends a little bit on how Judge Bachman came up with his number. And so this is what's interesting: is Judge Bachman says that he came up with $572 million because that's what it's going to take for 1 year. Okay.
Right.
And what he said is that the state of Oklahoma did not present sufficient evidence for a 20 or 30-year, $17 billion abatement plan. So basically, he said they gave great evidence that it's going to cost $572 million in year one, but I wasn't convinced by their case for what it's going to cost in years 2 through 20 or 2 through 30.
Which is, it's not going to be, we're not going to whip this problem in a year. I mean, that's just
Right.
self-evident, I think.
Right. And so I think the question is, I think one question that the attorneys for the state might have is, are they allowed to come back in a year and be like, okay, here's where we are, and based on what we know after a year of work, here's what's going to cost for the next 19 years, right? I think Johnson & Johnson would say, no, you can't do that. I don't know what the right answer is. But also, it could be that the State Court of Appeals says that calculation that Judge Bachman came up with for year one is incorrect, or I think that maybe they could find, no, we think that there is evidence for a 20 or 30-year abatement plan, but then they would send it back to Judge Bachman to come up with a number, I think is one possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this is an emergency pod to say we have an answer that provides us with more questions.
That's fair. But we have some answers, right? Like, at least we know this. And then and there's more to come. But as you said, it's going to take years.
No matter what the State Court of Appeals, the State Court of Appeals does, I think whatever party loses is probably going to appeal to the Oklahoma State Supreme Court. And from there, it could go to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, the federal court. And then from there, it could go to the Supreme Court of the U.S.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine that if I was Johnson & Johnson and I had a ton of money that I could spend on a whole team of 100 lawyers, that I would definitely try to spend it and see, if there's a chance I could appeal to a higher court, not just for the financial reasons. I don't think they're worried about the money. I think they're worried about the principle, right?
Well, I think they're worried about the principle, maybe from a legal standpoint, because if they don't appeal this, right, if they say they accept the verdict or whatever, and they don't appeal it, they may be worried that doesn't portend well for them in the 2,000 other suits that are pending around the country, particularly the big federal suit that's in Cleveland right now.
Well, and that's the other thing is that, Oklahoma getting this money is separate because we're not a party to that lawsuit, right?
Correct.
So this is just our cut. there's a chance that they could get hit for more, right? It's obviously gonna be a larger sum because it's more parties, but um, it's really I'm really interested. Do you know, Scott, when that trial is set? Do they have a date
I
yet?
I do not. I don't have any idea when that one's going to start. I think that they are. I think there's still a lot of like pretrial stuff going on.
Hmm. I guess we'll wait and find out. Well, so are there any other opioid lawsuits still to come for Oklahoma, or are we all done?
So I think there are a number of cities and counties, municipalities that are planning on suing these companies individually. The Oklahoma City of Oklahoma City has retained a firm to proceed with that kind of a lawsuit, and there are a number of other municipalities around the state that are also planning on suing them on their own too. So this is not the last that we're going to hear about opioids in Oklahoma, but I think I think that there's a lot still to come from this case, and then a lot of other cases that are going to be filed.
Yeah, yeah. All right then. Well, in that case, we will, I think, sign off on this emergency pod. And if there's anything else that happens this week, I guess we'll address that. But I think it should be fairly quiet for a few days. Just a reminder to our listeners that this Friday, the 30th, we will have our first episode of our gerrymandering series will be posted. So be sure to check your feeds for that. Scott, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, man. Have a good night.